My name is Brooke Callahan. I'm 34 years old. And 2 years ago, I sat inside a police interrogation room and confessed to a crime I did not commit. The detective slid a folder across the table. Photos. Evidence. My name at the top like I was already guilty. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just said, yes, I did it. But here's what nobody in that room knew. I had a recording on my phone, sitting in my pocket the entire time. Something that would have changed everything. And I said nothing. Because what I was protecting was worse than anything in that folder. Before I tell you what actually happened, like this video, subscribe and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Now let me take you back to when it all started. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where everybody knew your name and everybody knew your business. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My mom worked double shifts at a diner. My dad was mostly absent. So from the age of 12, I was the one holding things together. I cooked. I cleaned. I walked my younger siblings to school. I didn't complain. That was just life. By the time I was 19, I had a job, a small apartment, and a plan. Get out. Build something. Don't look back. Then Marcus came along. He was confident. Funny. The kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they'd been waiting for him. I wasn't looking for anyone. He found me anyway. 6 months later, I moved in with him. I told myself it was love. Looking back now, it was the worst decision I ever made. And I had no idea what I was walking into. Marcus had rules. Not the kind he ever wrote down or said out loud. You just learned them. Fast. Don't question where he'd been. Don't ask about money. Don't talk to certain people. Don't bring up certain names. I followed them. Because when I didn't, the atmosphere in that house shifted. Nothing violent. Not at first. Just this cold, heavy silence that sat on your chest until you apologize for something you didn't even do. Within a year, I had cut off most of my friends. I told myself I was just busy. That was a lie I got very good at telling. Then one night I found a phone. Not his regular phone. A second one. Tucked inside a jacket pocket in the back of the closet. I opened it. There were messages. Dozens of them. Names I didn't recognize. Numbers with no names at all. Short, coded exchanges that made my stomach drop. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I didn't say a word. But something shifted in me that night. I started paying attention differently. Watching. Waiting. Writing things down. I just didn't know yet what I was collecting evidence of. 3 weeks after I found that phone, something happened that changed everything. I came home early from work. The front door was unlocked. Marcus's car was in the driveway, but the house felt wrong. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. I walked into the kitchen. There was a man I had never seen before sitting at my table. Mid-40s. Expensive watch. He looked at me the way people look at furniture. Marcus walked in from the hallway. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. He introduced the man as a business associate. Didn't give a name. Didn't explain why he was in my kitchen at 2 in the afternoon. The man stood up, buttoned his jacket and left without saying a single word to me. I asked Marcus who he was. Marcus said, nobody. Don't worry about it. That was the moment I stopped believing anything he told me. That night I went back to the closet. The second phone was gone. But I had already taken photographs of every single message on it. Every name. Every number. Every exchange. Sitting on my phone. Hidden in a folder he didn't know existed. I didn't know it yet. But that folder was about to become the most dangerous thing in my life. 2 months passed. I kept my head down. Went to work. Came home. Cooked dinner. Acted normal. But every night after Marcus fell asleep, I was on my phone. Cross-referencing names. Searching numbers. Piecing things together slowly like a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. What I found wasn't small. Marcus wasn't just a man with secrets. He was moving money. Large amounts. Through people. Through businesses that didn't really exist. And that man in my kitchen, the one with the expensive watch, he wasn't a business associate. He was the one running it. I had names. Dates. Amounts. All of it sitting in that hidden folder. Then one evening Marcus came home different. Tense. Distracted. He barely spoke through dinner. Around 9 o'clock his phone rang. He took it outside. He was out there for 40 minutes. When he came back and he sat down across from me and said, if anyone ever asks you where I was last Thursday night, I was home with you. All night. I looked at him. I said okay. I didn't ask why. I already knew asking was pointless. But Thursday night I had been at my sister's place. Marcus had been alone. And somewhere across town that same Thursday night, a man had been found dead. His name was Raymond Holt. 47 years old. Found in a parking garage on the east side. Single blow to the back of the head. No witnesses. No footage. The news covered it for 2 days then moved on. I didn't move on. Because Raymond Holt's number was in those screenshots on my phone. 3 conversations. The last one sent 4 days before he died. I sat in my car and read those messages again. My hands weren't shaking. That scared me more than anything. Marcus didn't mention Raymond once. Didn't react when the story came on the news. Just kept eating dinner like the man had never existed. That told me everything. A week later 2 detectives knocked on our door. Calm. Polite. Routine inquiries. They asked Marcus a few questions. He was smooth. Almost charming. Then one of them looked at me. Were you both home last Thursday evening? Marcus didn't glance in my direction. He already knew what I was going to say. And I said it. Yes. We were both home. All night. I watched the detective write it down. I had just lied to the police for a man I was terrified of. And the worst part, that wasn't even the lie that would destroy my life. That was still coming. 3 days after the detectives left, Marcus sat me down. No anger. No raised voice. Just that cold, measured tone he used when he wanted you to understand something without him having to say it directly. He said, "You're a smart woman, Brooke. You know how to stay quiet." That's rare. I nodded. He slid an envelope across the table. Cash. I didn't count it, but it was thick. He said, "Consider that appreciation." I left the envelope sitting there. I didn't touch it. Something about picking it up felt like signing something. That night I checked my hidden folder. Everything's still there. Screenshots. Names. Dates. Raymond Holt's number. All of it intact. Then my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. No introduction. Just 4 words. "He knows you looked." I read it twice. Deleted it. Sat completely still for 10 minutes. Then I did something I still think about. I forwarded every single screenshot to an email address Marcus had never seen. An account I had created 6 months earlier under a name that wasn't mine. I don't know what made me do it that night specifically. Maybe I already knew what was coming. Maybe some part of me was already preparing for the moment I would walk into that interrogation room and say the words that would turn my entire life upside down. 2 weeks later the detectives came back. This time they weren't polite. They didn't sit down. One stood by the door. The other put a photograph on the kitchen table and watched my face. It was Marcus, taken from a distance. Outside the parking garage where Raymond Holt was found. Timestamp in the corner. Thursday night. 11:47 p.m. I looked at the photo. Then I looked up. The detective said, "We know he wasn't home that night, Brooke." My mouth went dry. He said, "We also know you know that." Marcus was in the next room. I could hear the television. Some game. Volume up just slightly louder than normal. The detective leaned forward. Low voice. He said, "If you know something, now is the time." I thought about the folder. The screenshots. Raymond Holt's number. The anonymous message. The envelope of cash still sitting untouched on the counter. I thought about what happened to Raymond Holt. Then I thought about my sister. My younger brother. The people Marcus knew. The man with the expensive watch. I made a decision in about 4 seconds. I looked the detective dead in the eye. I said, "I need to tell you something. But not here." He nodded slowly. Handed me a card. I slipped it into my pocket without Marcus seeing. That card sat against my chest like it was burning a hole straight through me. I called the number on that card 3 days later. From a petrol station 2 miles from the house. Paid cash for a coffee I didn't drink. Stood by the window watching the road the entire time. The detective picked up on the second ring. I told him I wanted to meet. Somewhere Marcus wouldn't see. Somewhere that looked like nothing. We met at a library. Tuesday morning. I told Marcus I had a dentist appointment. I sat across from the detective and I put my phone on the table face down. He waited. I said, "I'm going to tell you something. And before I do I need to know what happens to me." He said, "That depends on what you tell me." That wasn't the answer I wanted. But it was an honest one. I took a breath. I told him about the second phone. The messages. Raymond Holt's number. The man in my kitchen. The envelope. The anonymous text. He didn't write anything down. He just watched me talk. When I finished he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Brooke, do you understand what you're describing?" I said yes. He said, "And you've had this information for how long?" I didn't answer that immediately. Because the answer to that question was going to change everything. For Marcus. For the investigation. And for me. I told him 8 weeks. He sat back in his chair. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't have to. He said, 8 weeks, Brooke. Just like that. Flat. like he was reading a number off a page. I said I was scared. He said, I understand that. But you lied to us. Twice. In your home. On record. I knew what that meant. He made a call. Stepped away from the table. I sat there staring at the grain of the wood, counting the seconds. 30. 40. A full minute. When he came back, he sat down and folded his hands. He said they needed me to come informally, answer questions on record, that I should consider speaking to a lawyer before I did anything further. I said, what happens to Marcus? He said, that's not something I can discuss with you right now. I said, what happens to the people around him? He paused. That pause told me more than any answer would have. I thought about the man with the expensive watch, the coded messages, the way Raymond Holt's name disappeared from the news in 2 days. Marcus hadn't acted alone. I knew that. The detective knew that. And somewhere out there the people Marcus worked with were still watching. I walked out of that library into sharp cold air, got in my car, gripped the steering wheel, and made the decision that would put me in that interrogation room. I didn't call a lawyer. I know. Instead, I drove to my sister's house, sat in her driveway for 20 minutes without going inside. Then I drove home. Marcus was in the kitchen when I walked in, making coffee, relaxed, like a man with nothing on his conscience. He said, how was the dentist? I said, fine. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling and ran every possible outcome through my head. If I handed over the evidence, Marcus went down. But so did everyone connected to him. And those people knew where my sister lived, where my brother worked, where my mother finished her shift every night at 11. If I said nothing, Raymond Holt got no justice. And I spent the rest of my life waiting for a knock on the door. By 4 in the morning I had made my decision. I got up, got dressed, drove to the police station. I walked up to the front desk and I said, I need to speak to someone. I want to make a confession. They put me in a room. Gray walls. 1 table. 2 chairs. A camera in the corner with a small red light. A detective came in. Not the same one from the library. Someone new. He sat down, clicked his pen, said, in your own time. I looked directly at the camera, and I told them I killed Raymond Holt. The room went very still. The detective stopped writing, looked up slowly. He said, you're telling me you killed Raymond Holt? I said, yes. He said, walk me through it. So I did. I had rehearsed it enough. The parking garage, the time, the details I had pulled from the news reports and stitched together into something that sounded real. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back, tapped his pen twice on the notepad. Then he said, Brooke, where did you park? I told him. He said, which entrance did you use? I told him. He wrote something down, turned the notepad slightly so I couldn't see it. Said, and Raymond, did he know you were coming? I said no. He nodded slowly, said, okay, give me a few minutes. He left the room. I sat there under that red light and thought about Marcus asleep in our bed, about my sister, my brother, my mother finishing her shift. I thought about that folder, still sitting in an email account under a name that wasn't mine, untouched, waiting. 15 minutes passed. The detective came back in, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 more people behind him, one in a suit, one in uniform. He sat down, slid a photograph across the table. He said, the entrance you described. We have footage of that entrance that night. He tapped the photograph. You're not on it. I didn't move. The detective said, Brooke, you didn't kill Raymond Holt. I said nothing. He said, we know you didn't. We've known since you walked in here. The timeline doesn't work. The details don't match. You weren't there. The man in the suit leaned forward. He said, so let's talk about why you're sitting in this chair telling us you did. I looked at the camera. That small red light. Still recording. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, opened the email account, the one under the name that wasn't mine, slid the phone across the table. I said, everything you need is in there. The man in the suit picked it up, scrolled. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He stood up, stepped out of the room. The detective looked at me for a long moment. He said, how long have you been carrying this? I said, long enough. He said, why didn't you come forward sooner? I looked at him. I said, because the people in those messages don't go to prison. They send messages to your phone at midnight. They sit in your kitchen uninvited. And they make problems disappear. Like Raymond Holt. Marcus was arrested that evening. The man with the expensive watch 3 days later. I wasn't charged. But I sat in that gray room for 6 more hours answering every question they had. And for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't afraid of the answers.